All right, welcome back everybody to the Training, Learning, and Development Communities AI Labs. Thank you for being here. If you could need your help just with this first part of every session is just to make sure that you're in the room. If you can just send me some emojis or post where you're logging in from in chat, I would really appreciate it. Just to make sure that we've got the session started. Okay, there you all are. Thank you. Jennifer in Chicago. Hello, Ron. Nice to have you here. Laura, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Thanks, everybody. All right. Yeah, looks like we've got a nice group here. I know that for this event, we're going kind of back to back throughout the entire event because we've got so many great sessions, so much great content, and hope that's okay. We don't have a ton of breaks, but all of it for me personally has just been really, really worth it. And I'm very excited for this next session. We have Joshua Luna here from Management on Demand, who is going to be talking about a product that he has. Let's see, I have it here listed. Revolutionizing your next leadership development program with Alice AI. Now, I don't have a huge bio or anything for you, Joshua, so that's going to be one of my first asks from you is I would like to hear more about who you are as a founder, and I know that you post in Slack regularly, you share articles. But what I do have for you is the bio says over the last 10 plus years, you've managed successful teams, delivered large scale learning solutions with a primary focus in leadership development and organizational development. But please, I'd love to hear more about you, and I'm going to go ahead and hide myself and let you take over.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that intro there. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I promise the session is not going to be boring. I know AI can get technical and a little bit tricky, so we're going to make this as conversational as possible. As you mentioned, my name is Josh. I'm over here in Chicago. I see Jennifer here from Chicago, Laura from Cedar Rapids. I see Oklahoma, Virginia. I love it. I love all the different locations here. But a little bit about myself. As you mentioned, spent the last 10 plus years in learning development, and I've really worked in that world of leadership development. I've had the pleasure of working with organizations and helping build out their managers, build out their teams, and overall building effective organizations that support their people. And that's really what this is about. That's why we go to work. We want to go to places that support our growth. And everybody in this room has a part to play in that support, in that learning for their employees. And today's conversation really is not just about AI generally, but it's about a very specific use case. And it's going to be talking about AI in terms of leadership development. Everybody here on the chat, can you throw something in here? I would love to know, does anybody here work with manager training or leadership development or create content for their employees who want to become leaders in the organization? I'd love to get just maybe an emoji, a yes, a +1, any of those work here. I'd love to get a feel for the room here. If anybody has ever worked with those types of programs or developed that type of content. You could throw in an emoji, a plus, a yes, a here, any of that. And if not, that's perfectly okay too, because really here, while we're talking about the use case of leadership development with AI, really I want everybody to focus and think about their roles and how their role will transform with the use of AI. Okay, I see a yes here, perfect. But what I really wanted to create and part of learning and development and being in that space was there was something missing. Every organization focuses on teaching their employees how to become better leaders through courses and workshops and essentially content. And I have found through my experience and my time working with different people and organizations is that it doesn't really work. The knowledge doesn't necessarily always stick. And unfortunately, that knowledge comes from experience. And that experience usually comes through trial and error, and it comes through being in tough situations. So I found those are some of the things I discovered just throughout my career and just working with those different people. So I wanted to work with AI and create a tool that can help bridge that gap between theory and implementation. And this is really where I mentioned that I want everybody in this room to really start thinking about how the roles are going to be redefined in the next couple of years, because leadership development being one of them, we want instructional designers and learning development pros to really become architects, essentially, architects of experiences. And with AI, you now have that opportunity. Management on Demand, which is the company that I run, we created essentially the first AI-powered leadership coach. We found that content, courses, workshops, all that traditional learning isn't necessarily going to help people become better leaders. So we wanted to find a way to use and leverage AI for that. At the end of the day, poorly trained managers cause organizations to fail. If you don't have managers that are supporting their employees and learning the right principles and things, organizations are failing. 223 billion is lost in the US just in the last 5 years due to turnover and issues with employee and manager relationships. Why should you care? Well, employees are the lifeblood of any organization. 84% say that poorly trained managers create unnecessary work and stress. 58% of employees say managers are the reason they left their organizations. And 36% say that their manager doesn't even know how to lead a team. 3.5 billion is spent every single year around the world on leadership development tools, systems, courses, and content alone. What's wrong with this? I mentioned a little bit earlier, I have found just through my discussions with people in their careers, there are issues with traditional programs. The average NPS score of an organization's program sits at an abysmal negative 29. Completion rates of online courses typically around 13%. And the biggest kicker, 10% of a leader's knowledge comes directly from formal courses and workshops. AI gives you all the opportunity to finally bridge the gap between theory and implementation. We really want our managers to learn the skills that it takes to become successful leaders and build successful teams. So at the end of the day, we wanted to learn how to leverage AI. And essentially what the company did, what I did myself was I figured out how to build this from scratch. I saw all the AIs come in last year and then in 2022 and figured, okay, there has to be a use case for this. And when I was exploring AI tools and when I was exploring just different systems that are existing in these, essentially that they're trying to sell these solutions, I thought, what if we can create something that helps L&D professionals? What if we could create something that helps instructional designers with their programs and their content? And that's where Alice AI came. Alice AI, I mentioned earlier, is the world's first leadership development coach, and it's meant to help managers out with different use cases. We want to simulate real life experiences and conversations, tough conversations, and practice. And this is where I mentioned where I want everybody in this room to really start thinking about how is their role going to change in the next couple of years. If you ask me, I think it's in terms of becoming learning architects. Instead of all of you creating content and creating these modules that people may or may not necessarily participate in, you all have the opportunity to start creating the simulations of experiences. What scenarios your managers need to practice in? What scenarios do your employees need to go through in order to learn essential competencies and skills within that organization to succeed? What can you simulate in terms of role-playing conversations? Do you have examples that you can then flesh out and build into real life? And that's something to where it's going to change how all of you work, essentially. We won't necessarily be stuck going through those traditional and standard LMS systems or those content creation tools. I'd love to know, just a show of hands, or if anyone wants to throw into the chat here, what content creation tools or LMSs do you use? And do you enjoy them? I always hear you got so many. You have Adobe, Articulate, you got 360, I've used, my gosh, dozens and dozens of LMS tools and content creation tools just creating content myself. And there's always this pain, there's always a struggle with using it effectively and then getting your employees to engage and want to take them after you spend all this time and energy working towards that. I'd love to know in the chat, are there any tools that you currently use? Anything that frustrates you during this process? Camtasia, SkillDrive, Captivate, Google Suite, Adobe, exactly. All of these take time and it takes energy from all of you having to just manually create page after page and slide after slide. Well, the future looks a little bit different because I see all of you simulating these experiences. For example, advice on tough situations at work. With AI and creating this leadership coach named Dallas, managers and employees can get advice on tough situations at work. They can essentially have a two-way conversation and receive timely advice in seconds. It's difficult for employees and managers to get any timely or unbiased advice. Think of the last time you ran into a problem or an issue. How long did it take for it to get resolved? Did you have to wait for somebody to help you out or guide you? AI, if it's taught well and it knows what it needs to, and it is simulating that real coachee relationship, it can help you out in a matter of seconds. Another use case is with brainstorming new ideas. You can help your managers and your employees brainstorm new ideas after they get stuck into a mental rut. Everybody gets a mental roadblock. But with the help of AI, your managers and your employees and even yourself, you can get past all that by getting a list of new ideas and finding out new ways to do things. Another potential use case here for AI, and especially Alice AI, is direct feedback on a decision. Everybody makes mistakes. Your employees will make mistakes. Your leaders will make mistakes. And the goal is for everybody to go straight to HR to have a conversation. But realistically, that doesn't happen within an organization. People usually wait until it's too late to get some feedback and to go to HR, or if they even decide to leave them at all. But with AI, your managers and your employees can get feedback on what they did wrong. If they know they, let's say, had a terrible conversation with somebody and they said the wrong things, they probably want to learn how to improve next time. With AI, they can get feedback directly on that situation and figure out how they can improve next time so that they don't make the same mistakes. Another use case with AI, and especially Alice AI, is getting recommendations on how to learn a new skill. Every single employee and manager is on a different learning journey. Managers will be able to take feedback and coaching they receive from their managers or their own mentors and create personalized learning journeys. Imagine having the ability to just conversationally and casually chat with someone that helps you give personalized advice that's relevant to you about your career and where you want to go within an organization or just overall with your job and your career. Alice AI and just using artificial intelligence can help you create those personalized learning paths. And finally, role play. This is that simulation that I discussed a little bit earlier. As instructional designers and learning development professionals, how can you create environments where your managers and your employees are practicing different situations before they happen? You can role play, and with artificial intelligence, we can role play in safe environments. They can practice tough conversations with employee performance. They can practice tough conversations. Maybe they're butting heads with another coworker or employee. You want your managers to and your employees to learn these skills before they happen. When your managers are running through trial and error within the organization, there can be terrible consequences. Employees quit, people leave organizations, and they potentially ruin relationships. They can make projects last longer than they need to, or potentially lose clients. Those are things that you don't want to have at the expense of potentially learning something new. With artificial intelligence, your employees, they can learn through these different skills in these simulated conversations, specifically through role play. I had a question here from Lauren. Hi, Josh, I'm new to this. Would your system, Alice, be originally trained via some sort of coach, health psych trained to back neural nets? Again, I'm only now learning more on how AI layers are created. Absolutely. So, this is where I'll get into really the bulk of the conversation here, because I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how it works. But also, if you have any questions, I'd love for you to throw them into the Q&A portion. I believe there's a separate area for questions. If you want to know how it's built, if you want to know how it came about, if you want to know how it can help you today, if you want to know any potential ways it replaces other things, any of those questions, everything is open. I love talking about this. Always happy to share just why I'm doing this and especially why I think it is helpful for others. But I'm gonna go ahead and answer that first one, and I can also flip my screen and show you how it works in real life. But Alice AI specifically was trained on a couple different things. One being the subject matter expert on everything leadership development and management training. So Alice AI knows everything about personality types, knows everything about different conversations with managers, knows history on top leaders of the world from decades and decades of experience. Alice knows also trained on behaviors of a coach. So when you're using Alice, Alice is not necessarily an information repository system, meaning, hey, Alice, I want these 5 top skills. Explain them to me. She's not necessarily going to give you all the answers right off the bat. She is designed purposely to be conversational. So she'll ask you questions to learn context. And I've even done blend studies within my own users and people who have used it and currently using it now. 100 out of a study of 100% of all participants in this study They enjoyed, preferred, and actually learned more having conversations with Alice AI compared to a traditional ChatGPT, asking and using the same questions and same conversation pieces. Alice is pre-trained in all that. So Lauren, hopefully that answers a couple different questions there. But the two biggest ones to summarize are going to be one being that subject matter expert on everything leadership development, everything management training, and also the second piece being that she is trained as a coach. And when I have conversations with employees and users who use the product itself and companies, I always like to say, hey, if you put Alice up against any of your traditional, at least mid-tier coaches in real life, I guarantee you Alice will perform better. Now, is this a perfect use case for a CEO who manages 200,000 employees worldwide? Maybe not, depends. Alice AI is available 24/7, knows everything it needs to about that subject matter, and is available to help. And what's crazy is usually in these types of environments where you're trying to learn stuff, it's difficult to ask for help. And we have found that through the use of artificial intelligence and building systems like Alice AI, people are a little bit more apt to ask questions, or a little bit more apt to admit that they might have made an error or that something specifically is wrong that they need to fix or address. And this works in conjunction with your real teams. You can start conversations with Alice AI and also flesh them out in real life with your own HR practitioners or your own managers. But I'll go ahead and I'll exit this presentation screen. I'll reflip this again. This is just a QR code if you ever want to connect with me on LinkedIn, but I'll actually show you how the product works. I'm gonna go ahead and flip over here. Got another question here from Jennifer, not specific to what Alice's AI's function is, but how did you choose the name Alice? Perfect. Thank you. I love these questions. Trust me, I'm such a big AI nerd on all this, and especially being in the L&D world. I'm not an engineer by background or trade, but everything I do and the reason why I do it, all of it is with learning and development in mind. So there's a very specific reason. There's two. The first one being it's actually an acronym. It stands for Artificial Leadership Intelligence Coaching Expert. So the acronym for Alice, right off the bat there. The second one is actually meant to double for, and this was a little bit later after the acronym, but if you've ever read or if you ever watched the movie Alice in Wonderland, where Alice goes through the rabbit hole, and that rabbit hole is meant to symbolize that exploration of potentially new opportunities and learning. And yes, it's a little bit wonky, it's a little bit crazy, but when you open yourself up to new opportunities of learning, that's how you grow. That's how you grow as a professional, that's how you grow teams, that's how your managers grow, that's how companies grow and become successful, essentially. So there's that dual meaning right there. And yes, you probably heard me use she. I branded it and I made it to be as realistic as possible. Is it meant to replace a person? Absolutely not. But the more friendly we're using technology or making technology, the easier it becomes for people to use it, to trust it, and to learn from it. My goal is for everybody who uses tools like Alice AI is essentially to become better professionals, better people. And we can do that with technology. My goal is never to replace people. My goal is never to say don't buy a coaching package or don't hire a coach. But I want Alice and I want anyone who's using AI, I want you to think of it as a co-pilot. How can you use tools like this in your organization, in your real life? How can you use tools like this to make your life better? Alice AI is just one specific use case, and that happens to be with leadership development. Managers are a stubborn bunch. If you've ever worked with any, or if anybody else here works with manager training or development, managers are stubborn. They have no time, no free time on their hands because of their busy workload. They fail to admit when they're wrong at times, and it's extremely difficult for them to ask for help. Alice here is meant to be that co-pilot, essentially, to get them through those tough times and to help them, even when they're too afraid to ask other people around them. But I mentioned a little bit earlier, if you have any questions, please throw them into the Q&A portion of the chat. I believe there is a separate section for the Q&As. I can go ahead and answer them as they come, or if you want to go ahead, you can throw them into the chat as well. My goal is to make this as conversational and as informal as possible, not trying to pitch and sell a product here. I love AI, I love this conversation, and I love this product, so everything is fair game for me. But you'll notice here a little bit of a screenshot of what this looks like. Part of building Alice and developing this was to be conversational. I wanted Alice to become essentially your leadership development coach. And a couple different things were part of that process. One is being friendly. You don't necessarily want to just ask things and then just get a response. It becomes a little hollow. You might notice that if you've ever done a Google search or if you've ever used ChatGPT or any standard AI tools that exist. You ask a question, you get an answer. Alice here is meant to have a little bit of personality. You'll notice a couple things like exclamation points, and you'll also notice a couple different questions that Alice asks back. Why? Because she wants to know a little about you. She wants to know more context. When she knows more context from your situation, she responds better. She knows more of how to tailor a response to you. You'll notice here, I haven't had a conversation with them, and I'll kind of scroll through slowly so you can see a little bit. And we can also ask questions here if anybody wants to throw in a couple test questions, Alice, and see how she responds here. But you'll see that she's very much meant to be conversational and give you advice, but she wants to know more. I'll pause here for a second so all of you can read. Is this helpful so far? Again, you want to, or especially with the way how I view AI, I want this to be a co-pilot for your managers, for your people, for yourself. How can you do that? One way is being conversational. So two, you'll notice that she's not necessarily giving away a lot of information right off the bat. If you ask ChatGPT a question of, hey, I'm going through this, you're going to usually get a wall of text. And it's up to you as the user, as the person who's using ChatGPT, to figure out, okay, is this helpful? Do I need to fix it? Do I need to tell ChatGPT, no, you did it wrong. Please do this for me again. It becomes very, very stressful, very annoying at times if you've ever been stuck in that situation. Alice is already pre-built, so she's very much conversational. She knows how to continue those conversations. So at the end of the day, help you reach the desired goal together. So in this specific scenario, I said, Alice, I don't understand how to approach this conversation with empathy and understanding. Can you help me understand and practice based on this scenario? So you'll see that Alice here gave a little sample script. And these are some of the use cases that I mentioned a little bit earlier. Alice can help with that role play. Alice can give you scripts on situations. If you're going through something that is bothering you, you can share with Alice, and Alice will give you some of those tips and help you understand why you might be feeling some of those things, why you might be experiencing them, and what you could be doing instead to help you. Because Alice's goal is to help these users become better leaders. So whenever that manager, that employee is sharing that information, that context is building upon itself to help get better and better answers. I've had people here who use Alice do paragraphs of explanation. And I've also seen people who just say, hey, Alice, I had a tough day today. And then Alice's response, okay, let's figure it out. What specifically is going on in your day and let's see how we can help. So a couple different ways that you can utilize this, but I'll go ahead and open up. I'll see if there are any questions here in the chat. If anybody wants to ask anything, I can go ahead and copy paste it here into Alice. If you have any question that you want to ask and see in real life here, I'm also more than happy to explore deeper on AI in general. I mentioned a little bit earlier that this is the future of L&D. This is exactly where I see the world going. I mentioned a couple stats early in this presentation. Courses don't have the pull that they used to. A couple of years ago, 10 years ago, it was all the rage having learning libraries, and now we had micro courses, and we want to build content. Yes, those are great tools to have in the background, but people don't exactly engage with those things as often as you'd like. The goal is for everybody to read every piece of content, post, blog, go through the course. That doesn't always happen, and especially with managers and leaders, you really have a group of people who are time starved. They don't have the time to go through these things themselves. So Alice is meant to help them in those types of situations so that, okay, I don't have time to read a book. I don't have time to take a 30-minute course. But you know what I do have time for? I can do a text message. I can send a casual message and get a response. And through the use of two-way conversation, that becomes that level of engagement that you would want to build. But tying back to that point earlier, think about all your roles. When you have tools like this, think of creating those simulations of experiences that you can build for your company, for your team members. Knowing that if I was an instructional designer now at one of your companies, I can say, okay, I'm going to use AI, something like Alice, and help my managers come up with 10 different ways to have a tough conversation with my employee about performance. And then you can share, okay, employee, hey, this is what you should paste into Alice because this is the best way to practice this. I want you to go through 10 prompt exercises so that you can then build that muscle and build that skill. At the end of the day, practice and experience is what makes great leaders. 10% of a leader's knowledge comes directly from formal training courses and workshops. So we're trying to create those simulations of practice and experience without necessarily going through that blood, sweat, and tears. Got a question here from the chat. How does Alice answer questions where there may be company-specific constraints? Great question. So there are a couple roadblock or safety blocks, whatever you would like to call it, rail blocks when it comes to very sensitive information. So company-specific information isn't necessarily going to give context for Alice to make it better. So anytime there's something HR related, and anytime there's something specifically legal related, I built Alice to pretty much defer you to go to someone else in real life. Those aren't necessarily the types of questions that Alice is going to want to answer. And it's also just for me as knowing that I have clients and people who use Alice from all over the world. There's no specific way for me to get into specifics on municipalities, states, countries, company specifics. So typically you'll find conversations kind of defer them out to anything HR related or within the company. That's a very, very, very great question. And is there anything else specific that you meant by company specific restraints, or was that helpful? And please, everybody, please feel free to add more questions. Keep them coming. I've essentially broken off the last part of this presentation here for any questions. If you want to test out Alice with any questions, or if you just want to know a little bit more about the use case, all of that is completely open for me.
Hey Josh, how about I'm looking at the courses and the resources on the interface. Can you talk about what
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. So Management on Demand is the entire platform itself. There are micro courses and there are also additional resources that go part of it. The most popular piece, of course, is Alice, with being the AI piece. But if people want to reference a course, or if they want to see something about a specific skill, they can go ahead and take all the courses. All of these are meant to be micro or nano courses. Nothing is longer than 10 minutes. They're all designed that way on purpose. Usually attention spans are pretty small, and most of these courses will go over very specific how-to frameworks on what you need to do to learn a very specific skill. This one, for the example that I just clicked on, is how to build a culture of learning. At the end of the day, and this is part of just kind of that conversation of AI. Okay, so what are we doing with AI? What is AI going to do for us in the future as a learning organization? If you ask me, artificial intelligence and learning is the way of the future. You want to create co-pilots, essentially, or virtual assistants that can know everything about any subject matter that you choose and are available 24/7. Sometimes people like that comfort of traditional learning. So the platform also has courses and documents and resources available if you want to read something, if you want a list of questions or a checklist that you want to use, if you want to go through a course on a very specific skill. All of the courses here are broken into 8 specific competencies. Those are competencies that I have studied, researched, and implemented throughout my career and with many, many organizations and employees. These I have found to be the most essential competencies to creating strong and effective leaders. There are about, I want to say 40. I'll probably be adding about 60 more for a total of 100 in the coming weeks and or a month or so. But the biggest piece I've been seeing a lot of people rotating towards is Alice AI. But great question. I love that.
Excellent. So, and I saw there was a dashboard that was available. Where was that?
Yeah.
I thought
Do you
maybe
mean right here?
no, maybe it was in the AI coach. Was there a dashboard option when? No, where did I thought I saw something that was a dashboard. Sorry, because I was
Yeah,
wondering.
no,
I mean,
no.
does this function as an LMS at all, or is it something that you could actually load content into?
Sure. So I thought of that before. Short answer, no. So
Mhm.
I've had those internal conversations of thinking, should I make this an LMS and have it be something that's a little bit more robust and customizable? The reason I went for no and the reason why it didn't end up being that way is because I wanted to be true to the mission and the goal, which is to help develop leaders and managers with artificial intelligence, building those learning co-pilots. And if I created something where people can upload an unlimited amount of courses, it defeats the purpose of what I'm saying, which is people don't really watch those courses. You can have them, people will do maybe a few of them, but never to the extent to where that knowledge retention is going to be cemented or where you want those people to grow and to build. And I'm making some very, I don't want to say necessarily definitive statements, but these are my findings from just conversations and research with organizations and people. So I didn't want it to be that system where, oh, cool, let me upload all these things and I'll have available. I've played with probably hundreds now LMSs. I've downloaded and used a bunch of them, and they're all more or less. I mean, they're good. Some are great. There's nothing wrong with them personally, but that is not where I personally see the world going in terms of learning and development. And then it becomes a little bit more difficult. How as learning professionals and instructional designers, it becomes difficult to manage all that. What if something's outdated and you want to fix it? What if something is broken? You have to go figure out what the bug is and what the problem is. But to that same end, I do have the option to incorporate Alice AI onto a pre-existing environment. Meaning if you all have like, hey Josh, I love it, I don't care for the platform, I can have Alice AI embedded into a web page that you already have or some dashboard that's available only for your managers. So that is an option. I run a company of one, so I am the main employee. I am the founder, marketer, engineer, product support, customer service, all of the above. So I like to tell people, if you have an interesting use case and you really like the idea of it, we can probably make something happen. So that is another avenue that I've explored and had conversations with. People
Nice.
sometimes want to host it on their own environment.
Josh, I'm just so curious to just also as a company of one, like
Yeah,
your whole evolution from being like an L&D practitioner to being a founder. I like to hear that story, and I think that it actually is
absolutely.
important. So, any way you can talk about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if anybody has any questions along the way, please feel free to let me know. I'm happy to throw some of the answers there. But really it was just because I worked in L&D for a little bit of time and I got my start in sales training and building out sales training programs. I found that through time, the questions people asked and the knowledge people wanted to learn they were specifically about leadership, not necessarily about sales. And as my career went on, and I worked with different companies building different programs, I always noticed roadblocks. Working and learning, there are very tight restrictions at times. Budget is a big one. A lot of times your teams aren't going to have a lot of money to work with, which usually means you have to get creative or you might have to sacrifice the quality of one thing just to push out another. Another part of that also was just you can't make people learn. Whether you're an instructional designer, whether you are a learning development manager, or teacher, educator, doesn't matter what your title is. As much as you love what you're doing and the content you're doing, you just can't make people learn. And at times that becomes so frustrating. It becomes confusing. Like I'm doing the right things. I don't understand why I can't do this. Why aren't people taking these things? Why don't they want to learn? And then the third piece was essentially at the end of the day, learning development sometimes isn't always going to be the most investable department within an organization. Sometimes leaders and CEOs and your C-suite, they don't necessarily want to put resources and time into learning development. So that you will often find some restrictions in that sense. And that's essentially why I spun out and essentially decided to do my own things. That's why I run a company one. That's why decided to build a company. I wanted to work on solutions for people and make a larger impact, essentially. I didn't want to be held or constrained by the limitations of just one organization. I wanted to say, okay, I'm coming to your company and these are the things that I see. This is what can happen. I think we can go big. I think we can get creative. I think we can really make an impact. This is how you do it. Whereas if I were to do that as a practitioner inside an organization, there are usually 10 times the amount of more questions. We don't have money for that. We don't want to do it. What's the game plan? People don't want to take it. More excuses essentially, as opposed to becoming somebody coming from the outside saying, okay, this is a problem, this is what you have to do. You want to do it? Great. No, budget's not enough. Budget's not an issue. Great, let's do it. It's a little bit easier coming from the outside, unfortunately, at times. But that really propelled my journey a little bit into becoming a founder. And I think a piece of that too, which is I believe would be helpful for everybody on this conversation today, or just anybody part of this conference, is to become really open and learning skills. As me being an L&D professional, I was always frustrated when I didn't learn something or know something when I was building out a training. Being an L&D, you're going to work with different departments and different people who know different skills that you don't know. And it becomes tough sometimes because let's say you're working with engineers creating training, and you're not an engineer yourself, so you don't know what they're talking about, and you don't know what's happening. And you're just relying solely on them for them being that subject matter expert. That gave me the impetus to want to learn new skills and want to learn things. So I was very fortunate in teaching myself different things like coding, working with databases, financials, data analytics, light engineering, every product design, web design, video editing. I could list all the skills. It gets so weird, man.
I
So
know.
I wanted to, you're going to have to learn those things as a founder. But at the time, I remember just dealing and working with these different departments thinking like, oh man, I can't create a training on video editing if I never edited a video before. Hell, let me make a video myself and see what I can do. So it became one of those, like, what do you call it? Not a master of one, but oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the phrase now. But it'll come to me, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
learning all these different skills, which eventually becomes very useful as somebody who's working themselves and in building out a company.
Oh no, I know that all too well. Believe me, it's just like you have to be a full stack everything. So it's
Right.
it's tough. I want to yeah, there you go. Thank you,
Thank you. There
Tracy.
we go.
Yeah,
There
thank
we
you.
go. And
So
that's one of
I'm going to
my,
put Morel's
yeah, absolutely.
question on stage here. When using ChatGPT, I notice how much it wants to please. Is that the same with Alice? Or will she also give you very strict and honest feedback if necessary to help you grow as a manager?
Exactly. I love that question. Thank you, Morale. ChatGPT is essentially, and there are a couple different ways to use AI, and there are three buckets of AI, and maybe this will help frame the answers to this question. There are essentially three buckets of AI, or at least how I view artificial intelligence. The first bucket is primarily for information. So it's an information repository. ChatGPT falls into that first section of information repository. You want to know something, it's going to give it to you. Whether it's right for you, whether it's wrong for you, whether it's right or wrong in general, that's not up for it to decide. It just gives you information. It could say like, hey, I want to recipe for how to make muffins made out of dirt and sand. It's going to say, you know what? This is how you make a muffin with dirt and sand in it. Enjoy. Whereas something like Alice AI is meant to be very contextual in the conversation. So it's not going to necessarily give an answer right off the bat just to appease you. Alice, the goal of Alice, at least in the way that I designed it, is to keep on asking questions until it gives enough context to give an informed opinion. The same way that you would have a conversation with a professional coach. And if anybody here has hired a coach or been a coach or mentor to somebody else, you realize that your conversations can't just be one-sided. You have to understand, what is the meaning behind this? Why are you asking me this question? Okay, how do you feel about that? Is there something there that bothered you? Through those questions and through that rapport, that context is built up, because when that individual is giving you those answers, you're getting a little bit of honesty in there. Typically, I've found when people use tools like this, they're not lying because they have nothing to lose. Usually when you're having a conversation with a person, a lot of things can go wrong. You're trying to impress them. You were maybe fibbing a little bit. You want to maybe talk about something that seems a little better than it actually is. When you're using technology like this, you're a little bit more prone to getting truthful answers because there is no risk. It is meant to be risk-free in a safe environment. So to answer your question, really, it's Will she also give you very strict and honest feedback if necessary to help you grow? Absolutely. So that's part of the learning process, and that's part of the coaching. If you're telling me that you have a problem with building relationships with the employees, and the answer is, well, tough luck. That's part of being a manager. You have to eventually build the relationships with your employees, or you're not going to do a very good job. Alice has no problem saying that, especially as she learns that, okay, you haven't had any conversation with your employees. Okay, your feedback on your employee performance is always you're missing the mark on building relationships with employees. That's more contextual information for Alice to say, well, you got to do this, or it's not going to be something that's really great for you. Essentially, I love that. And Mural, this is a really great technology. Love it. Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, it's really cool. There are very specific reasons as to why I built this, and then feel free, anybody else, if you want to explore or ask questions on this too. It's really meant to be that co-pilot. I want your managers to really want to learn and engage, and I can't think of a better way to build engagement with someone's learning than creating a friendly face that wants to invest in your personal growth. It's very difficult to sway away from that.
Josh, do you have like a successful use case you can tell us about?
Absolutely. So I can't name specific company names, but there's a specific client and company who's using AI for their managers. It's about a list of about 50 managers. They, for the life of them, could not figure out how to get them to attend manager training sessions. And that, I'm sure, is just, you know this yourself, building a conference hard. You got to promote it. You got to make people register. And after they register, you have to make sure they show up. And if they even show up, are they engaged? It's very difficult. So company A, let's call them, for specifics, company A had a very tough time getting managers to join their trainings. They're always afraid that, well, if we put it too early, they don't want to come. If they put it too late, they don't want to come. And they've always experienced this type of issue. So my solution, when I went in and had a conversation with them, my recommendation was, well, stop doing the things that aren't working. You know your people are busy. You know they're not signing up for this. Stop putting in the effort there and reframe how you position education and learning. So I offered them, okay, Alice. Alice is conversational. Alice is available 24/7. Alice doesn't need your permission for your employee to use it. Give them access to Alice, and I guarantee you engagement will shoot up. I guarantee you people will want to know more. So when we saw people, when we started hearing about people using Alice and enjoying those conversations, my next recommendation was to then marry the courses and the workshops and the conversations in conjunction with Alice. Because this is there are a couple different ways to use Alice, but one of the ways, and part of company A's success in this was working together. You want to use Alice to drive that interest for the corporate organizational learning. You want your employees to engage with Alice, and then you want your employees to want to dig deeper in that in-person training because, okay, I'm using Alice. She's giving me great advice. I love this. I want to know more. Oh, guess what? She just told me about feedback. Okay, my main company now is having a session on feedback. In that session and feedback in real life, they're talking about how to use scenarios and simulations on Alice about feedback. So now as a learner, I'm very interested and I'm more likely to participate because I like talking to Alice. She's giving me great advice. Now my company is teaching things that are going beyond maybe what Alice is telling me. And they're also showing and sharing prompts about how to use Alice even further when I'm not able to attend a course or if I'm not able to attend an in-person training. So you start to see it, they work in conjunction as opposed to a replacement. So I think that was something to where and I'm also learning in the process as well. I see an endless amount of use cases, but also as I'm going through this and working with companies and individuals, I'm seeing stories and people are telling me like, oh, hey, I used Alice to role play a scenario where I didn't know how to give this employee feedback about this tough situation because they scare me. I'm like, well, wow, I didn't think that would happen, but it's an opportunity for learning on something that I'm also learning a part of this too. So I think that's something where I think company A was really successful in driving engagement and participation. It's so tough in L&D to have actual meaningful metrics. And one of the easiest ones, low hanging fruit, is always participation and engagement. NPS scores is another one. So those are things that we saw an uptick within that specific organization.
Interesting. Very cool. Joe
Yeah,
Pellegrino's got this one. Can Alice coach on leadership skills for L&D professionals?
great question, Joe. Two answers to this. One, Alice is specifically built for leadership development and management. So my second then goes into my second question. Leadership skills for L&D professionals, yes. Leadership skills are for everybody. I don't care if your first job and you're 16 years old working at McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, or you're a senior VP at ExxonMobil. Regardless of function, regardless of role, Alice can help you if you are truly looking to build leadership skills. So if you were in L&D specifically, the conversations would be completely different, of course. It'd be, okay, these are the skills that you need to learn. These are the competencies in learning and development that are recommended. Okay, what is your goal for leadership? What does that mean to you? Is it a manager? Is it running a team? Is it running programs? Is it as a consultant, giving advice within organizations? All of that will be discovered, of course, and it all depends on how you have those conversations. But short answer, yes. L&D pros, HR, engineering, product, doesn't matter. I want it to be, and this also goes with that principle I also hold firmly and believe in, is it doesn't matter who wants to learn these skills. I believe anybody will benefit from leadership development skills. And
Nice.
L&D is a great use case for that as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think we've hit time. What do you got? Anything else you have for us, Josh?
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to pop into that booth. I'm in there throughout the day. If you have any questions, you want to see anything, if you want to quickly scan this QR code, there's a link to my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me there and ask questions. I love talking about this stuff. Luis, you know this, being a founder and a team of one, I'm up 24/7. So you'll most likely catch me. I will respond to your message at some point. I'm always up. I'm always available. Essentially, I probably shouldn't admit that, and I probably shouldn't
I know
say
you got to
that.
get some rest, man. You got to get
Yeah,
some rest.
yeah, but feel free to connect with me, everybody. Let me know if you like any of this. If you want to chat more, if you want to see a demo, if you just want to ask questions, chat AI or L&D. I'm always up for it. I love it.
Thanks. Thank you, Josh. I really appreciate you
Absolutely.
participating. Yeah, and you're supporting the event too, just being a sponsor. Thank you so much. I really do think it's interesting learning more about AI products in L&D, and especially the founders that are building these things. We can learn a lot from you, and it's and really just even watching the kinds of problems that founders like you are trying to solve. That's an important thing to keep an eye on, because that is basically what's going to define the industry. So thanks again
Absolutely.
for being a part of our event. And everybody, I'm going to go ahead and close the session out. We've got a couple more left today. I know, just back to back to back to back, but oh gosh, there's just so much out there to learn. And tldchat.us if you want to join our Slack group, because Josh is in there every once in a while. So please feel free to join that group, tldchat.us. It's free, and we're in there chatting away most days. So feel free to jump in when you can. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot. Thanks again, Josh. We'll see everyone in the next
Absolutely.
one.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.